In a quiet suburban neighborhood, a simple afternoon turned into a nightmare. A black child, innocent and unaware, suddenly became the target of a brutal act, attacked not by a stranger, but by the very man trusted to keep the community safe, the HOA president. But what seemed like a display of unchecked power would soon spiral into something far greater than anyone expected. Because this child wasn't just another victim. He carried a secret connection that could bring the entire neighborhood to its knees. What happens when those in power pick the wrong person to mess with? The boy was just 11 years old, full of energy, and known around the neighborhood for his bright smile. Most afternoons, he could be found riding his bike down the quiet suburban streets, waving at neighbors and racing the wind. His parents had raised him with respect, discipline, and a deep sense of kindness. To anyone who looked, he was simply a child enjoying the freedom of summer, soaking in the innocence that every child deserves. But beneath the calm surface of this neighborhood, not everyone saw him that way. To some, his presence was unwelcome, his skin color a silent trigger for resentment. And while the boy only thought about how far he could pedal before dinner, others were watching, judging, waiting for a moment to put him in his place. The boy had no idea that one of those people lived just a few houses away, the man everyone knew as the HOA president. A man who wore a smile at community meetings but carried something far darker behind closed doors. For weeks, he had noticed the boy, growing more agitated each time the child rode past his perfectly trimmed lawn. In his mind, the boy's very existence was a disruption. And so, on one ordinary day, as the boy coasted past, the tension that had been building in silence was about to erupt. What happened next would not only shake this quiet community, it would expose a truth no one saw coming. The boy had been warned before, at least that's what the HOA president liked to claim. A frown when the bike rode too close to his lawn, a harsh word about rules and order, muttered loud enough for neighbors to hear. Most brushed it off as the usual grumpiness of a man too obsessed with control. But for the boy, it was different. He wasn't just told to be careful. He was told he didn't belong. On that day, as the boy pedaled past, the HOA president's anger finally snapped. He stormed out of his house, his voice sharp and cruel, barking accusations that the child was damaging property, disturbing the peace, and breaking rules he had never broken. The boy froze, his hands gripping the handlebars tighter, confusion written across his face. He was just a kid on a bike, but in the president's eyes, he was a threat. The shouting grew louder. Neighbors peeked through blinds but stayed silent. Some whispered, some shook their heads, but no one stepped forward. The man's rage only escalated. Without warning, he grabbed the boy's bike, yanking it to the ground. The boy stumbled, scraping his knee, his heart racing with a fear he had never felt before. The HOA president towered over him, spitting words laced with hate, words no child should ever hear. The boy's cries echoed down the street, but the silence of bystanders made them louder. No one moved to help. No one stopped the assault. In that moment, the child realized something terrible. Not everyone in this community saw him as a neighbor. To some, he was only his skin color, and that alone made him a target. Then came the breaking point. The HOA president shoved the boy, his rage boiling over into violence. The child hit the ground hard, clutching his scraped hands, his innocence shattered. Just when it seemed like the attack had gone too far, the sound of a single voice cut through the chaos. A calm, firm tone. Not panicked, not uncertain, but commanding. The kind of voice that made people stop in their tracks. The HOA president froze. His face paled as he turned toward the source. Because the boy was not alone. Standing just yards away was the last man he should have crossed. The boy's father. And this was no ordinary father. This was a man whose authority reached far beyond the neatly trimmed lawns of the HOA. The FBI director himself had just stepped into the picture. The street fell silent. The HOA president, still breathing hard, turned and locked eyes with the man now standing at the edge of his driveway. The boy's father didn't shout, didn't rush forward. He didn't need to. His calm presence alone carried more weight than the HOA president's rage ever could. Neighbors who had stayed hidden began to slowly step outside, sensing that something extraordinary was about to unfold. The boy struggled to his feet, his scraped hands trembling as he clutched his bike. Tears streaked his cheeks, but when he saw his father, a flicker of relief washed over his face. He wasn't alone anymore. He wasn't defenseless. The man who had sworn to protect families across the nation was now here to protect his own. The HOA president sneered, still trying to hold on to his false authority. "This kid doesn't belong here," he spat, his voice dripping with venom. But his words wavered, his bravado cracking under the weight of the silence that followed. Because in that moment, the boy's father stepped closer, and with every step, the truth of who he was became undeniable. The badge, the authority, the power to dismantle lives with a single phone call. It all hung invisibly in the air. The man who thought he controlled this neighborhood suddenly realized he had picked the wrong enemy. His bullying wasn't just cruelty anymore. It was a crime committed against the son of the nation's top lawman. His arrogance had just placed him at the center of a storm he could never contain. The crowd leaned in, breathless, waiting for what would happen next. And as the boy's father finally broke his silence, his words cut sharper than any fist could. "You attacked my son." The HOA president's face drained of color as the weight of his actions finally hit him. The boy's father didn't need to raise his voice or flash his badge. The truth was already in the air, undeniable and crushing. Within hours, police cars lined the quiet street, sirens cutting through the stillness that had once hidden injustice. The same neighbors who had remained silent now watched as the man who claimed to uphold community order was placed in handcuffs, his power stripped away in front of the very people he had once intimidated. For the boy, the bruises would heal, but the memory would not fade so easily. Yet standing beside his father, he no longer felt small or unseen. He understood now that silence can be broken and that justice, even when delayed, can roar louder than hate. The neighborhood would never forget that day. Not because of the HOA president's cruelty, but because of what it revealed. That racism doesn't always wear a hood or shout in the open. Sometimes it hides behind titles, authority, and carefully trimmed lawns. And when left unchallenged, it grows until it lashes out at the innocent. But here's the truth. It should never take power or position for a child to be protected. No parent should have to be the FBI director to ensure their son is safe in his own neighborhood. And yet, this story reflects a painful reality, that too often, justice only arrives when privilege stands behind it. So the question remains, how many more stories go untold when the victim doesn't have someone powerful to fight for them? And how many more will it take before silence is replaced by action?